Today is a very, very special event because it's part of the Innovation Summit. Thank you to the organizers of Innovation Summit. But also, I get to chat to somebody who is a renowned entrepreneur. He's the father of mobile banking. He created the first mobile payment platform that was deployed first in Zambia for a company that I worked for when I got my first formal job, Cellpay. And Fundamo was recently acquired by Visa for $110 million. So it's a great success story coming out of South Africa. And today we're pretty privileged to have Hannes van Rensburg, who lives in Florida, but is here with us today. Big hand for Hannes, please.
Thanks, Andras.
Thank you, Hannes.
Are we going to undress? Is that what you're doing?
I think we undress right now. We get real. So welcome to Startup Grind. It's really a privilege to have you here. And tell us just where were you born, and we chatted a little bit about your parents, which was pretty interesting. Tell us about that.
Well, my parents were born in Zambia, both of them.
Yes.
And so
I wanted to just hear that again.
So I'm an African. I can trace my what do you call it? My lineage back, 12 generations to 1709 or something like that. And so
wow.
I am an African.
Awesome. And where were you born?
I was born in a town called Bethlehem in the Free State. I don't know if you know about that.
Yes,
they say that the birds fly upside down there because there's nothing to look at.
Anybody from Free State? I see, that's great. And so you spent your childhood there, and what kind of child were you?
Oh yeah, that's I've been thinking to say something about it. Once again make an acknowledgement in front of you. I was a kind of a geek. I had difficulty making friends. I was that guy that they look at on the playground and say, sorry, no, go do your own thing and so forth. So, I think it does have an impact in terms of how you grow up, right?
Yeah. And what were some of those impacts? Both, were they positive and negative, or both, or one-sided? What was it like for you?
No, I think it was hard, right? So if I can share some of that, and maybe that's something to start off by talking about being an entrepreneur. Maybe there's some people sitting in the audience that can relate to that.
Yes.
In having difficulty socially, right? But I think it's very important to work on that if you want to be successful and get some guidelines about things that's important to you, that's unnegotiable, values, things that you believe in, and things that's unnegotiable in your own personal way that you go about in life. I was fortunate to be able to get through a childhood that was a little bit different to the ordinary rugby playing guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it. Great. And then to get over that, was it just people that helped you with that, or did you work on it on your own? Were you reading a lot?
Yes. Yeah, I was very fortunate to have been exposed to people along my life that was good role models and spoke to me about the right things and so forth. I read a lot for sure, and there was a lot of thinking going in about who I am, what is important to me, and I think that's quite important.
Great. And so which schools did you go to before you went to?
Ooh, you didn't warn me that you can ask me this stuff. I went to high school.
I was going to ask you stuff that we can't find on the internet.
Well, I was keeping it off the internet for... So I studied it at the University of Free State. My high school was a high school called Voortrekker High School. I'm not sure if it's still called that, but
it could still be there. I know that almost every city has got a Voortrekker road somewhere. And the main road.
Yes, no, absolutely. It was a great school, and we played. I mean, we had the best rugby team in the Eastern Free State. Yeah.
Great. And then for after school, where did you go for your college, university?
I studied at University of the Free State.
Oh, sorry, yes. And what did you do there? What did you study there?
Oh, yeah, that's another thing that I try to keep off the internet. I studied physics and started working at the South African Atomic Energy Corporation, working on secret nuclear projects. So part of me is a nuclear physicist. I know how to design nuclear devices, right? But
so you have a job right now. Okay, and because I actually found that the nuclear physicist found of mobile payments. Wow, that's pretty interesting. And what was your first job?
I worked at the Atomic Energy Corporation as a scientist.
Uh-huh.
We were modeling what was then called critical devices,
Okay.
which means that there's a sustained neutron reaction. I don't know if that means something to you, but luckily that's in my past.
I know sustained and no nuclear, but I don't know what that means in one sentence. Okay, great. And then moving on from that, did you stay, was that still in the Free State or was that in a different city?
No, that was in close to Pretoria in Brits, and luckily I escaped from that and started a startup with some friends in the late 80s. And it was a hell of a ride. We grew a company. I don't know if anybody would know the company, but it was called Infomet. And it was an exciting, we grew a huge company, sold it ultimately to IBM, and learned a lot about what not to do during that process.
And what were some of those things that you learned what not to do?
Don't sign sales contracts with performance clauses. Things like that.
And so after you sold, did you now go back to starting another company, or you went now to get the job? Or?
Yeah, I worked for a while in a corporate, which probably was important to do, to realize that for some people it's hard to be in a corporate. But I did work in a corporate, and I managed to get to quite a senior position in the corporate. And then I left.
What were some of those decision-making points for you to move from corporate to entrepreneurship? I know that's something that a lot of people trying to do. They incorporate, but they want to do something of their own.
That's the question that most people have asked me. I think that's the question that people ask me most, and I quite frankly has asked myself that question. I don't know. I don't know what make you do things like that, right? It was pretty crazy. My kids were still in school. I had a mortgage on the house. It was stupid, right? But luckily, I was fortunate in terms of how it turned out. But I cannot really say why. I think maybe the most important thing, there was something driving me, a belief in something, a vision for something that I think we could create that would make the world a better place, something like that.
And was that the birth of Fundamo?
Yeah, that was the birth of Fundamo. It was called Kariba first.
Kariba, oh, okay. Some more roots. I see. And when you started Fundamo, what was your mission? And did it stay the same, or did it change over time?
No, the what we wanted to do from the beginning, and even the architecture of what we were building, the product, remained pretty much the same. you know. And so I sometimes, when people talk about this pivot thing, right, you know, if you're not getting, you know, if it's not happening, then just pivot and do something else and so forth. We never pivoted. And I think it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to be hard, right? So if you have difficulty doing what you're currently doing, just carry on. Just push through with it. If you pivot, you're going to find something that's also hard to do, right? So I'm not saying that people shouldn't pivot, because there's good examples of how people pivot. I'm just saying, in my experience, you know, we stuck with what we wanted to do for effectively 11 years. Wow. And we just did it.
Wow. And you managed in the end to deploy in over 40 countries, right? And a lot of them within Africa, about 27 African countries. What was it like making the moving, deploying or starting your business or getting clients in different countries?
Yeah, initially we were just, you know, it's kind of, what I like to say is initially we were hunting rats. I mean, the way that you hunt rats is there's lots of them around, and you take, I don't know, a weapon that kind of shoot in a like a shotgun, yes, right? And you're sure to hit a rat, right? And so we killed these rats, which was like small, and, you know, not important really. They helped us feed ourselves, but rat meat is not very nice. And so to change the organization from killing rats to shooting an elephant was a major change for us, because you can't shoot an elephant in a herd with a shotgun, right? You have to plan it. You have to get the right weapon. You have to pick the elephant, right? And you have to study it. You have to understand what to do. And only when we started getting over that hurdle of feeding of rats, and I'm sorry for the thing, but maybe you will remember it, is, you know, to a mindset of shooting elephants. It was at that point, about 2007, 7 years into the history of the company, that we started really clicking and growing significantly.
Oh, wow. And did you do that with the same team? So if you have one team that's used to shooting rats, and then you say, look, guys, we need to now start shooting elephants, how did you handle that?
Yeah, very, very good question. No, it was not exactly the same team. You know, to start off was a team that I think there was only about 2 people, and not leadership people, that finished the journey with me. And so the team that I worked with actually changed. In the beginning, it was real, you know, mavericks and so forth. And in a region of about 2005, 2006, there was quite a change in the makeup of the management team, with more experienced people that have had experience of scaling businesses. And I think we changed the management team, and we changed the approach in terms of how we take things to market, and that made a big difference in the growth of the company.
I see. And then, did you find that certain countries were similar or easier to get into compared to others?
Yeah.
Or how was your scaling method, strategy? How did you do that?
Well, I mean, we started in Zambia, as you said, and that was by chance. I mean, it wasn't the plan. It was somebody that found us, and we got together, and we started building business in Zambia, and then we grew into Africa. And then at that stage, we were starting to say, we have to be more predictive about how we want to take things to market. And especially, we started doing some business in the Middle East. And then we said, okay, we have to go to Asia. And of course, we looked at it, did some study about it, and we said to ourselves, most people said we should go to India. And we said, wait a minute, let's do a proper analysis of that whole subcontinent. And we looked at all the markets, and in the end, we decided on Pakistan. There was nobody there. First thing, we were not competing because everybody was going into India. The regulations were better. It was more homogeneous. You know, and South Africans don't care to go to places where other people don't want to go. And so we had a whole strategy about Pakistan. And Pakistan became, I would say, the growth engine for a South African company called Fundamo. At some stage, you know, we were generating more than 50% of our revenue out of Pakistan. We were, at some stage, 97% of every mobile payment transaction was running on Fundamo technology. I was honored in, I think, in 2009, I got an award from the Banking Council in Pakistan as the Banker of the Year in Pakistan. So it's interesting, right? I mean, you wouldn't think that you could build a company on you know, going into a strange country like Pakistan. Pakistan is the 5th most populous country in the world. And, you know, I think that was a very, very thought out, very strategic move that we executed on well. And that was one of the reasons that we managed to grow the company significantly.
And then the move or the exit to Visa, what led to that? How did that happen?
So when was it? About 2010. By then, we were recognized as the biggest mobile payments platform in emerging markets. 1 in every 3 mobile payment transaction, at least, depending on how you count it, was running on our platform in emerging markets. We were by far the biggest. The second biggest player was a third of us in terms of size. But at that time, everybody was talking mobile payments, and we saw big companies like Nokia, which was then a big company, and and Ericsson and so forth, starting to enter into the space. Sybase, you know, big companies with lots of resources. And we decided very consciously that it's time for us to exit. We are very successful, we're growing fast, but we just don't have the seat at the table. You know, I can't pick up a telephone and say to a CEO, I want to, look, I'm from this little South African company in Cape Town, whereas somebody from Ericsson can do that. And then very actively, in about the latter half of 2010, we started putting a for sale sign on and went through a process of a very, very structured, well-planned process of finding people that would buy us. In the end, we ended up with 5. We whittled it down to 2. And then Visa put a firm offer on the table in February of 2011. We had a massive due diligence here in the city. And in June 2011, the transaction was concluded.
And what advice would you have for somebody who is thinking of exiting? Or do you build a company to exit, or you build it and then at a certain point you feel you need to exit? What advice do you have?
I think you should build a company in a proper way. Whether you're going to exit or not, well, it'll give you options. I mean, we were fortunate in terms of the people that was working and the guidance that we got, that our organization, the way that the governance of the company was very, very well done. All our financial statements were audited. All our contracts were filed. We understood the implications of every clause in our contract. I mean, initially we didn't, but when we started maturing and shooting elephants, those things were all in place. And so that was a very good basis to run a sustainable company, but it was also a very good basis to, to go through a due diligence.
Okay, I'll take questions from the audience. So if you can somebody can pass the mic. Before we do that, my question for you is, another question is, after you left, one would think that maybe after you founded one company, you founded another one, you've exited, you'd want to found another one as opposed to join SCI. And what was the decision around that? Or
okay, so that's a little bit of a background. You know, I mean, after selling Fundamo, I worked for Visa for 2.5 years, which was a great experience. I was one of the 4-person delegation from Visa to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Through Visa, I met a lot of people, and then I just thought, that's it. Now I'm going to do this thing that people do when they exit, and it's called retirement or sabbatical or whatever the case may be. And just for those of you that's considering it's a bad idea, don't do that. It wasn't good for me. I went through a major process of trying to figure out what is my worth in this world, right? And started looking at what I could do. And what I'm doing at this stage is, in a way, like a startup. It's very, very ambitious. It's impossible, right? It's not going to work. I'm probably going to, go down in flames, but it's a lot of fun.
Great, great. Is there anybody with a question? There's a question there. Oh, you need my mic. Okay.
With the blockchain and the future that it seemed to promise, even though with a lot of resistance from established financial companies and governments, do you think it would keep Africa to an advantage if we had to actually appreciate and start to adapt to the technology quicker? Or what do you think of the whole decentralized blockchain future?
I expected the cryptocurrency. The conference or the startup is not complete without it.
So let's just talk about, I don't know how to answer your question, quite frankly, but let me give you some thoughts, because it's a long discussion. The way that what is this thing, Bitcoin? Let's just take Bitcoin for a while. The way that cryptocurrency has been implemented with blockchain technology, in my mind, is absolutely not a viable consumer product. I think there's a lot of things that could happen in the back. I think there's a lot of things that could happen around settlement of transactions and so forth. But it is a fallacy that we think that and I know people are going to shoot me, but I'm just a straight shooter. Let's just think about the way that Bitcoin is implemented. If I do a transaction in Bitcoin, it means that before it is actually concluded, right, fixed in the distributed ledger, 50% plus one of the participants in this ecosystem has got to acknowledge that they have written it to the ledger, right? Now just consider that if we were to run a global currency where before I can walk out of the shop having bought my packet of chips for $1, right, that half the population has got to acknowledge that I've bought a packet of chips. Ain't going to work in that environment, right? So I think we've got to recognize there's other ways of implementing blockchain. We can have a long debate about it, but the way that blockchain is working today ain't going to work in a consumer environment. I think we've got to get over it. Debits and credits works quite fine, and we figured out how to do it so that we can do zillions of transactions in a second, and that right now I think is a good solution. I'm not saying that blockchain is not an important technology that one would use in many, many instances, but don't get hooked up on the idea that blockchain is going to be a consumer-driven technology. I think it's not going to work.
Another question?
I would like to know, what advice could you give, to fintech startups which are here in Africa, and how could they scale, to go maybe globally?
Okay. So he asked, what advice can I give to African startups in terms of scaling, and how will they be able to go go global. So I can do a lecture on that, right? So if I have to crystallize the essence out of what I think you could maybe make your own, you could picture two individuals, two entrepreneurs. The one, and I've seen both of those types of entrepreneurs. The one would be a person that says, I know, I have a clear vision, I'm just going to do what's necessary, and doesn't matter what gets in my way, I'm going to just go forward and get it done. And I am so confident that nobody can give me any advice, right? Let's take that as one extreme. On the other hand, you could have an entrepreneur that says, I'm uncertain about these things. I need to get guidance, and before I take a decision, I have to ask people, I have to get advisors and coaches, and I'm going to listen to them, and so forth and so forth. And you could get that picture. That's one extreme, and the other one is the other extreme. I think the biggest challenge for a successful entrepreneur is to figure out the judgment of how to balance between those two. You cannot, everything that you do, you can't get advice from. But sure as hell, you also don't have all the answers. You have to be very confident about where you're going and what you want to do. But I've seen so many entrepreneurs just going off and doing what they think is the best, whereas a little bit of sage advice would have helped them a lot. So I would say that is the most important thing, is to find that balance of following your own head and listening to others.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say that you confuse me, and it's very rare that you hear an Afrikaans guy saying it ain't gonna work. No, you live in America is really confusing me. But on a serious note, the reasons why I attend such events, I run a startup. It's not to hear your successes, but I want to hear your failures, because successes will not teach me a thing. With that in mind, I'd like you to take us through what not to do when you take on co-partners or co-founders in a business. Because I'm going through that right now. I'm actually looking for a co-founder, but I'm struggling because I pick up one thing and I think it's a red flag, and I say, okay, I'm going to go. So now I'm spending time doing that. So what are the telltale signs for people not to take on as partners in the business?
So, I mean, absolutely. First of all, you may know that I've written a book, which I think actually is a pretty good book, by cash in, cash out. I mean, by the grace, I mean, I'm not at all an author, but I specifically tried to write that book about how stupid I was, because I think you're absolutely right. You know, you have this thing that, oh, look at me, I now have all the knowledge. I don't, right? And I think the biggest advantage that I have is that I made so many mistakes. And I mean, in the book, I talk about the challenge that I had in my heart at one stage to get rid of one of the co-founders in the company, right? And ultimately, I know that that's the right approach, right? I asked this person to leave summarily, right? Like, get your stuff, go, right? To that degree, you know, you're not going to be here for another minute. And it was a very hard decision for me to take, and I think it was the right one. And the reason for taking that decision in my case, and I think that may be a good guidance. Everybody needs to form their own way of how they take decisions, is that we had a clash on some fundamental values. And that's why I say, when I was young, the thing that I had to struggle through was to find those values. What do I think is right and what do I think is wrong? And what are the things that I will do and that I won't do? And it doesn't have to be like that for everybody, but for me, if I don't find a match in terms of the fundamentals of what I believe is important, hey, you know what, then we can all work together. So I would say that's how you should look at it. You know, start from that basis. There's a lot of other things that you got to tick the box. You know, is the guy or the person capable? Do they bring the right experience? I mean, we can talk about all of those, right? And that's very important, of course, right? But you've got to remember, you're getting into something that is going to have an impact on your life. And the person that you're going to do it with is, you know, going to be fundamentally and instrumentally in what's going to happen to you. So think about that right from the bottom up.
Thank you. My name is Golulego. I just want to pick your thoughts on like something that is really bothering me right now. As the Innovation Summit is coming to the end, like for me, I don't know, but I look at the future right now and I'm really sad, to be honest. And what makes me sad is the fact that like the buzzwords throughout the summit, it's been like building smart cities, big data, like the all like stuff that's been really confusing to me. And when I came to Cape Town, like I was reading, I was hearing in the news and everything about the city being not water secure, drought. Western Cape has been declared a disaster zone, and we're busy like trying to invest in AI, and I couldn't find anything that's really trying to solve those problems. And also one of the biggest problems that I believe is like a biggest threat to our democracy, which is food security. And nothing was really focused on that. And so I just want to pick your mind on like that dichotomy of globalization and innovating at grassroots level, trying to really solve things that are really, really like a threat to us right now. Is this fourth industrial revolution gonna be like globalization, where like these Western countries are gonna come here and say, well, guys in Africa, you're hungry, but guess what? We've got like an iPhone 8 for you. So could you just help me on that?
So
Like,
let me
really
start.
sad.
So let me start. I like you. I like you a lot. And you shouldn't be sad. You shouldn't be sad. And yeah, absolutely. You know, we should solve real problems. And I mean, my message to you is just do that, right? Because Fundamo, we solved a real problem. And that was the mantra of what drives us, right? Of course, you have to know what AI is. Of course, got to know what blockchain is and how you can use big data, because it's tools that you could use, right? So it's not wrong to study it, but your mind should be focused on making the world a better place. And all the things that you've mentioned, I think there's huge opportunities, especially in Africa, because we have huge problems, but we also don't have any legacy, right? We don't have to decommission something and then build something new. We don't have to, you know, you think we have a lot of red tape. In the US, if you look at somebody strangely, you're going to get sued. Here, just do your stuff, right? So there's a lot of positive here, and yeah, don't feel sad. That's the only thing that I want to say to you. Feel excited. Feel about the opportunity that you have here in Africa to go out and make the world a better place.
My name is Kainsom Temb. Just to follow on my brother's question here up front, in terms of deciding your team, when you said to the other co-founder, they no longer need to be there, what was the power dynamic? Why couldn't they say you should go instead of you telling them to go? What gave you the right over them telling you the same thing you told them?
No, I think it's very important that I think my position about what needed to happen in that company at that stage was legitimate. I think that's a very important concept to understand. Legitimacy in terms of what you do is not just a legal concept. The rest of the organization, the employees understood it. They were actually waiting for me to do it, right? My shareholders understood it because I was in the correct position. My position was a legitimate position. I think that would answer, and I mean, it happened, right? That's why I could do it.
My question is, what gave you the power over them if they were also a co-founder, or if they felt the same, in the same strong way you felt?
I think they did feel the same strong way, but it didn't work, right? I don't know, you know, I was legitimate.
Did you have to make more shares?
I think that's what I'm saying. The staff would have walked out with me if I was not there because they believed in what I was doing. And I had the backing of the shareholders. But at that point, I didn't know that. I was doing the right thing right then. I didn't go and phone and ask and stuff like that. I phoned afterwards and said, Hein, you know what I just did? And it was the right thing.
Thanks. There's a question there and then there's a question there.
Thank you. Your scalability seems to have happened in Kenya and then your breakthrough came through in Pakistan. What was your experience in the South African ecosystem?
We had a hard time to grow in South Africa. I mean, first Zambia, we were successful in Zimbabwe, we grew into Uganda, and South Africa kind of happened, but it was really hard for us. I do think, I've seen, you know, if I look at the success of SnapScan here, and the fact that that's an entrepreneurial payments company that's backed by a corporate. When we started the company in 2000, it was really hard for us to sell to corporates. I have some really, really bad scars of trying to sell to South African corporates. And I think it's this thing about a prophet in his own country, you know. Not that I think I'm a prophet, it's just like a proverb, you know. So no, we really struggled with corporates. But I do think, based on what I can see, is that, you know, that's changing.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and just this inspiring story. I think my question is, did you ever consider maybe just putting the whole concept together, Fundamo, and selling it as a concept? Was that an opportunity? Is that an opportunity that exists? And what are the pros and cons should someone ever decide to take that route? I don't know if it happened.
No, there's nothing like a sellable concept. And furthermore, it was my baby. Do you ever sell your baby, right? I think what is sellable is not there's enough concepts. There's stackloads of concepts and ideas. I mean, they walk on the pavements, they stop you in every corner. There's lots of concepts. What is sellable is a mad person that's unstoppable. That's what's sellable. And so if you have a concept, find a mad person. Then you will sell it maybe later on or whatever, yeah.
Okay. All right, unless it's something completely different, otherwise we can continue the chat afterwards. You asked the question already.
It's different.
Okay, is there another question from somebody else? Just give somebody else an opportunity. There's a question from Bruce there.
Thank you. So I've been involved with a startup that this year sold for $200 million. I've started my own business. I've gone through the business partner thing. We fell out. went through a massive business divorce, the works. The one thing that worries me, though, is I'm 27. I consider myself young, but I feel like an old soul, because every entrepreneur these days, they try and say, well, we need to leverage multiple revenue streams, or I want to put my finger in every pot so that, they can make as much money as possible. But personally, for me, for what I've seen, and this is my 47th event, I've been talking to entrepreneurs worldwide. Like, the more you kind of spread yourself thin, the less it becomes your baby, as you said, and it just becomes a business that you try and make money out of. And I fight with people on a daily basis saying, no, why are you trying to do all of this? Why not just focus on your core business, making that great, building a legacy, rather than just trying to make money? Do you agree with my statement? Do you think I'm insane? What do you feel about the kind of the modern entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, if you're insane, it's good, right? So, I mean, how old are you?
27. I know I look 40.
I mean, I'm over 60, my friend. So, I think it's everybody's got to figure out for themselves. But for me, you got to be busy with something that that you can feel passionate about. You live once, you're going to do, and maybe that's something that's important. I think to start a business because you want to make money, that's important, and you want to think about it, and you got to do the right things to make money. But I think it's probably more important, I'm saying it with a little bit of caution, is to do something that you feel really passionate about and that's really important to you. I mean, this minute that's just gone past, you're never going to get it back again. And if you're doing something because you want to make money, I think you do the wrong thing. So don't know if I answer your question. Do what you feel passionate about, focus on that, and be busy with that. I think the money will come.
Perfect, thank you.
My last question to you is, what is the most unpopular opinion you have on entrepreneurship?
Yes. I think don't do it.
That's right. It looks glamorous from outside, right?
It's not. It is hard. You lose a lot of things in the process. So if this is not what you want to do, then really want to do with a burning passion. Like, this is really what you want to do. Don't do it because you think that's what what your parents tell you or your friends that you should be doing. It is not easy, and I sometimes feel that universities and environments make a big mistake by saying to people, you have to become an entrepreneur, because it's hard, and there's lots of people that fail. And there's lots of people that get hurt, right? It's on many different levels. I know many entrepreneurs that, is hurt. I mean, inside, and what they think of themselves and where they are. So it is not something to do lightly. It's like teaching people to do hang gliding, I would say. The first thing that you do is you tell them how dangerous it is, and what can go wrong and stuff like that. But we have this thing about entrepreneurship that it is like, wow, this is the thing to do. I think, if you don't feel like you want to be an entrepreneur, work for an entrepreneur, or do something that really, go and write music, or do something that is really you. Don't try and be an entrepreneur if you don't feel like you want to be one.
Wow, excellent. I totally agree with your unpopular opinion. Because statistically, people who are in employment actually would have more money and create more wealth than entrepreneurs. Although entrepreneurship from the outside looks glamorous, and that's why, but it's hard work, and that's why the few entrepreneurs that make it, we read about them. Great. Okay, so if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's really something you're passionate about, something that you want to do and want to change some people's lives. Thank you very much. A big hand for Hannes, please.